My sister Claire was 32 years old when she finally stopped trying to make our parents love her. I remember the exact moment. Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago. She'd driven 6 hours to be there, brought an expensive wine, helped mom cook all day, and when dad carved the turkey, he served everyone else first, left her plate empty until she had to ask. It wasn't deliberate cruelty. That's what made it worse. He just forgot she was there, the way you forget a piece of furniture that's always been in the corner, present but invisible. Claire smiled through the whole meal, made small talk, complimented the food, and when she hugged me goodbye that night, she whispered, "I'm done, Em. I can't keep doing this to myself." She moved to Seattle 2 months later, calls me every Sunday, sends birthday cards, remembers every detail of my life, but she hasn't spoken to our parents in 3 years. And until last week, I thought I understood why. Have you ever discovered something about your family that made you question everything you thought you knew? Something that reframed your entire childhood in a single devastating moment? If you have, you'll understand why I'm shaking as I write this. If you haven't, well, stay with me. Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, because that's how Claire felt her whole life, and I'm only now beginning to understand why. It started with a water leak. Mom and Dad were on a cruise, their 40th anniversary, a trip they'd been planning for years. I was house sitting, feeding their ancient cat, watering the plants, normal daughter stuff. Then the ceiling in the upstairs hallway started dripping. The leak was coming from the attic. I'd never been up there. Mom always said it was just old junk, nothing interesting. But I had to find the source before the whole ceiling came down. I pulled down the ladder, climbed up into the dusty darkness, and aimed my flashlight at the maze of boxes and forgotten furniture. The leak was easy to find. A crack in the roof, right above a stack of cardboard boxes that were now soaked through. I moved them aside, put a bucket under the drip, and was about to climb back down when something caught my eye. A metal lockbox tucked behind an old dresser. Green, rusted at the corners, with a combination lock that had been left open. I should have ignored it, should have gone back downstairs, called a roofer, minded my own business. But the box was already open, and something inside was calling to me. I lifted the lid. Inside were documents, old ones, yellowed with age, a birth certificate, medical records, letters in handwriting I didn't recognize, and photographs. I picked up the first one. A woman I'd never seen before, young, maybe early 20s, holding a baby. The woman was smiling, but her eyes were empty, hollow, like someone who'd already given up on something. I turned the photo over. Written on the back, in my mother's handwriting, "Claire, 3 weeks old, the day we brought her home." But the woman in the photo wasn't my mother. I sat in that attic for 2 hours. The dust made my eyes water, the cold seeped through my clothes, but I couldn't stop reading, couldn't stop looking, couldn't stop the slow unraveling of everything I thought I knew about my family. The documents painted a picture I didn't want to see. Claire wasn't my full sister. That much became clear within the first 10 minutes. The birth certificate listed a different mother, someone named Danielle Hartwell, and the father's line was left blank. But the rest of it was so much worse than a simple affair or adoption. There were hospital records, psychiatric evaluations, court documents with words like custody transfer and termination of parental rights, letters from lawyers, from social workers, from people whose names meant nothing to me, but whose words painted a portrait of tragedy. And there were more photos. Danielle Hartwell at 16, pregnant, standing in front of a house I didn't recognize. Danielle at 18, gaunt and hollow-eyed, holding toddler Claire at arm's length like she was afraid of her. Danielle at 20, in what looked like a hospital gown, staring at nothing. The last photo was dated 3 years after Claire was born. In it, my parents, young, barely 30, stood in front of a courthouse, holding Claire between them. Claire was smiling. My parents were not. Written on the back, "Adoption finalized. God help us all. God help us all." What kind of person writes that on an adoption photo? I climbed down from the attic on shaking legs, called a roofer, barely heard what he said, made myself a cup of tea that went cold in my hands. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I started researching Danielle Hartwell. The internet is a strange thing. 20 years ago, this search would have been impossible. Now, with a few clicks, I could uncover a stranger's entire history. Danielle Hartwell, born 1971 in Millbrook, Connecticut, graduated from Millbrook High School in 1989, no college records, no employment history after 1993. But there were news articles. Local woman found dead in apparent suicide, December 14th, 1998. The same year Claire turned 6. I read the article 3 times, each word landing like a physical blow. Danielle Hartwell had struggled with mental illness her entire adult life, severe depression, psychotic episodes, multiple hospitalizations. She'd given up custody of her only child in 1995 after an incident that the article didn't describe but called a danger to herself and others. 3 years later, she'd walked into the woods behind her mother's house and never walked out. She was 27 years old. I put down my phone, stared at the wall, tried to make sense of what I'd just learned. Claire's biological mother was mentally ill. She'd given Claire up or had Claire taken from her and then kills herself 3 years later. That explained the adoption. Maybe even explained some of the distance my parents kept from Claire. But it didn't explain everything. It didn't explain why my mother looked at Claire sometimes with something that wasn't just coldness, but fear. It didn't explain why my father flinched whenever Claire touched him unexpectedly. It didn't explain the whispered arguments I'd overheard as a child, the ones that stopped the moment I entered the room. There was something else, something the documents hadn't told me, and I was going to find out what it was. 20 years earlier, I was 7 when I first noticed that something was wrong. We were at the park. Mom, Claire, and me. Claire was 11, too old for the playground, but tagging along anyway because she wanted to spend time with us. With Mom, specifically. She was always trying to get closer to Mom, always orbiting her like a satellite, hoping to be pulled into a warmer orbit. I was on the swings, pumping my legs, trying to go higher. "Mom, watch me. Watch how high I can go." Mom watched, smiled, clapped when I jumped off at the peak of my arc and landed in the sand. My turn. Claire ran to the swings, started pumping, going higher and higher. "Mom, look." Mom's smile faded. She glanced at her watch. "We should probably head home soon. Emma, come get your jacket." Claire slowed, stopped, let the swing come to rest. She didn't say anything, but I saw her face, saw the way something crumpled behind her eyes. I was 7. I didn't understand it, but I felt it, this asymmetry in our family, this invisible wall between Claire and everyone else. "How come you don't watch Claire?" I asked Mom on the drive home. "What do you mean?" "At the park. You watched me, but not Claire." Mom's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I was watching, honey. I just got distracted." But she hadn't been watching, and she knew it, and I knew it, and in the back seat, silent and small, Claire knew it too. That was the first time. It wasn't the last. There were birthday parties where Claire's gifts were practical, socks, school supplies, while mine were toys and games. Parent-teacher conferences where Mom and Dad forgot to show up for Claire but never missed one of mine. family photos where Claire stood slightly apart as if she'd been added in post-production. I tried to fix it. I'd share my toys with Claire, invite her into my games, insist that she be included in everything. And Claire accepted my offerings with a gratitude that broke my heart, even then, even when I was too young to understand why. "You're a good sister," she told me once. We were lying on her bed, staring at the ceiling, talking about nothing and everything the way kids do. The best sister anyone could have. "You're a good sister too." "I'm not, though." Her voice was distant, detached. "I'm the extra one, the one they didn't plan for." "That's not true." "It's okay, Em. I've known for a long time." She turned to look at me, and her eyes were ancient. 11 years old and already ancient. They didn't choose me. They got stuck with me. There's a difference. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, that Mom and Dad loved her just as much as they loved me. But even at 7, I knew I'd be lying. 15 years earlier, Claire left for college when I was 12, full scholarship to a state school 3 hours away. She'd worked for it, studied relentlessly, achieved a perfect GPA, despite everything. Despite the silence at dinner tables and the forgotten birthdays and the 1,000 small cruelties that accumulate into something unbearable. The day she left, Mom helped her pack the car. Efficient, businesslike, the way you'd help a colleague move offices. "Call if you need anything," Mom said. Not, "I'll miss you," or "I love you," or any of the things mothers say to daughters leaving home for the first time. "I will." Claire hugged her. Mom's arms stayed at her sides for a beat too long before rising to return the embrace. Dad was in his study, didn't come out to say goodbye. Claire went to the door, knocked, waited. "Drive safe," he called through the wood. She stood there for a moment, hand raised like she might knock again. Then she let it fall. "Bye, Dad." I rode with her to the end of the driveway. Stupid, childish, but I wanted to give her something, some proof that someone in this family would miss her. "You'll be okay?" I asked. "I'll be great," she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'll be free." I didn't understand then. Now I do. College changed Claire, or maybe it just revealed who she'd always been underneath the desperate need for approval. She stopped coming home for holidays. "Too much studying," she'd say, or "I picked up extra shifts at work." She called less often, texted in brief, carefully neutral messages. She was protecting herself, building walls our parents couldn't breach because they'd never tried to breach them anyway. I became the good daughter by default, the one who stayed close, who called every week, who showed up for every dinner and holiday and obligation. I told myself I was being a good daughter. I was really being a coward. I knew something was wrong with our family, knew there was a crack running through its foundation that everyone pretended not to see. But I didn't ask questions, didn't push, didn't demand answers, because part of me, the small, shameful part, enjoyed being the favorite, enjoyed the warmth that Claire never received, enjoyed not having to fight for love that should have been freely given. That's the thing about family dysfunction. It doesn't just hurt the ones who are targeted. It corrupts everyone, turns us into accomplices, makes us complicit in cruelties we didn't choose but also didn't stop. Claire forgave me for it. She always did. I never forgave myself. Present day. I waited until my parents returned from their cruise to start digging. Not confronting them. I wasn't ready for that yet. Just watching, listening, looking for the pieces I'd missed my whole life. "How was the house?" Mom asked as I handed over the keys. "Any problems?" "Small leak in the attic." I called a roofer. Something flickered across her face. "The attic?" "Yeah, I had to move some boxes to find the source." She went still, just for a second. Then the mask was back, smooth and impenetrable. "Find anything interesting up there?" It was a test. I knew it. She knew it. Just old junk, I said. Nothing interesting. She nodded slowly. Good, that's good. That night, I went through the documents again, photographed everything with my phone, put the originals back exactly where I'd found them. Whatever I was going to discover, I wanted proof. The letters were the hardest to read. They were from Danielle Hartwell's mother, Claire's biological grandmother, addressed to my parents, begging them to let her see Claire, offering money, promising to stay away if they'd just send photos, updates, something. My parents never responded. Or, if they did, the letters weren't in the box. The last letter was dated 2003. Please, she's my granddaughter, the only piece of Danielle I have left. I'm begging you. Claire would have been 11. The same age she was when she told me she was the extra one. I found the grandmother's obituary online. Margaret Hartwell died 2015. She'd never gotten to know Claire, never gotten to tell her anything about where she came from. And Claire still didn't know any of this. As far as she knew, she was my parents' biological child, the mistake they'd made before they made me, the disappointment that preceded the golden child. She didn't know she was adopted, didn't know her biological mother was dead, didn't know there was a grandmother who'd spent years trying to reach her. My parents had kept it all hidden, built a wall of silence around Claire's origins, and made sure she never saw over it. Why? That's when I decided to find someone who might know the truth, someone connected to the past who might still be alive. Danielle Hartwell had a brother, Thomas Hartwell, 2 years older, still living in Millbrook, according to the internet, a phone number listed right there in the white pages. I stared at that number for 3 days before I finally called. I need to stop here and ask you something. If you were in my position, if you'd found these documents, uncovered this secret, would you have made that call? Would you have kept digging, knowing it might uncover something you couldn't unknow? Or would you have put everything back in the box and pretended you never found it? Tell me what you would have done in the comments, because I'm still not sure I made the right choice. The phone rang 4 times. Hello? A man's voice, older, tired. Is this Thomas Hartwell? Pause. Who's asking? My name is Emma Porter. I think you might be my sister's uncle. Silence. Long, heavy silence. Then, I've been waiting for this call for 30 years. We met at a diner halfway between Millbrook and my parents' house, neutral territory. Thomas Hartwell was in his late 50s, thin and weathered, with eyes that had seen too much. He was nursing a cup of coffee when I arrived, looked up as I approached, studied my face. You look like your mother, he said. Which one? He almost smiled. Linda, your mom. Though I suppose Claire probably looks more like Danny. Danny, his sister, Claire's biological mother. I slid into the booth across from him. Thank you for meeting me. Didn't think I'd ever hear from anyone in your family. He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. Your parents made it pretty clear we weren't welcome in Claire's life. I didn't know about any of it. I found documents in my parents' attic, and I need to understand. Thomas nodded slowly. What do you want to know? Everything. Who was Danielle? Why did she give up Claire? Why do my parents act like Claire is, like she's a punishment? The word hit me like a slap, but it was accurate. That's exactly how they treated her. Yeah, Thomas sighed, took a long sip of his coffee. Danny was my baby sister, smartest person I ever knew. Could have been anything, doctor, lawyer, whatever she wanted. But things happened to her when she was young, things that changed her. What kind of things? The kind that break people. His voice was flat, guarded. She was 14 when it started. Symptoms that nobody recognized. Voices. Paranoia. By 16, she'd been hospitalized twice. Schizophrenia? That's what they called it eventually. Back then, nobody knew what to call it. They just knew she was Different. I thought of Claire. Different. That's what she'd always been in our family. Different. She got pregnant at 17, Thomas continued, dropped out of school, had the baby, tried to be a mom. For a while, she managed. The medication helped. She loved Claire. God, she loved that little girl more than anything. So what happened? Thomas's jaw tightened. She had an episode, a bad one. Claire was 2 years old. Danny stopped taking her meds because she thought they were poisoning her, and he trailed off. There was an incident. CPS got involved. Claire went into foster care while Danny was hospitalized. And that's when my parents adopted her? Not exactly. He looked at me, and something in his expression made my stomach drop. Claire went to your parents because they weren't strangers. Your father and Danny, they knew each other from before. I stared at him. What do you mean from before? I mean, your father was there when it all started, when Danny was 16 and everyone's lives changed. Thomas leaned forward. Your father is the reason my sister got sick in the first place. The diner seemed to tilt around me. I don't understand. Richard Porter was 22 when he met my sister. She was 16. Beautiful, brilliant, full of potential. Thomas's voice turned bitter. He was her tutor. Math. She was struggling, and her parents hired this college kid to help her. No. Yes. He seduced a mentally fragile 16-year-old girl, used his position of trust to take advantage of her. And when the relationship went wrong, when she started showing symptoms of the illness that would destroy her, he disappeared, left town, pretended none of it ever happened. I couldn't breathe. Are you saying my father? Your father is Claire's biological father. The words hung in the air between us. Impossible, obscene. Claire isn't your half-sister, Emma. She's your full sister. And your mother has spent 30 years raising the child of her husband's teenage victim. I drove home in a fog. Dad, my father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who walked me down the aisle at my wedding, who bounced my children on his knee and told them stories about his own childhood. That man had seduced a mentally ill teenager when he was in his 20s, had abandoned her when she got sick, had left her to spiral into poverty and psychosis while he went on to build a respectable life with another woman. And then, years later, he'd taken in the daughter he'd created, raised her in his house, at his table, under the same roof as the wife who'd never known the truth. Except, Mom did know. The documents in the attic proved it. She'd known from the beginning who Claire really was. She'd spent 30 years raising her husband's secret child, looking at Claire's face every day and seeing proof of his betrayal. No wonder she couldn't love her. No wonder she flinched when Claire reached for affection. Every hug from Claire was a reminder of the worst moment of her marriage. And Dad couldn't love Claire either. Because every time he looked at her, he saw Danielle, saw his own guilt, saw the teenager he'd used and discarded like she was nothing. Claire was a living reminder of their greatest shame, and they'd punished her for it her whole life. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for an hour, hands on the steering wheel, trying to decide what to do next. Tell Claire? She deserved to know the truth. But what would it do to her to learn that her biological father had been treating her like a burden for 30 years? That the man who forgot to watch her at the playground, who forgot to say goodbye when she left for college, who forgot she existed at every family gathering, that man was her actual father? Confront my parents? They'd lie, deny everything, maybe destroy the documents before I could prove anything. Go to the police? What my father did was illegal, statutory rape, grooming, whatever you wanted to call it. But Danielle was dead. The statute of limitations had long since passed, and there was no justice to be found in the legal system. My phone buzzed. Claire's weekly Sunday call. "Hey, Em." Her voice was warm, unsuspecting. "How was your week?" I almost told her. The words were right there, pressing against my teeth, demanding to be released. But I couldn't. Not over the phone. Not without proof, without preparation, without a plan for how to catch her when she fell. "Good," I managed. "Uneventful. How's Seattle?" We talked for 20 minutes about nothing. Her job, her cat, the restaurant she'd tried last weekend. Normal sister stuff. When she hung up, I sat in the silence of my car and made a decision. I was going to confront my father, alone, and I was going to make him tell me the truth. I showed up at my parents' house unannounced. Mom was at her book club. Dad was in his study, the same study where he'd hidden from Claire her whole life. "Emma," he looked up from his computer, surprised. "What are you doing here?" I closed the door behind me. "I know about Danielle Hartwell." The color drained from his face, slowly, like watching water leak from a glass. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't." My voice was harder than I'd ever heard it. "Don't lie to me. I found the documents in the attic. I talked to Thomas Hartwell. I know everything." He sat back in his chair. For a long moment, he just looked at me, his good daughter, his golden child, now standing in his study with 30 years of secrets between us. "What do you think you know?" "I know you were Danielle's tutor. I know she was 16 and you were 22. I know you had a relationship with her that resulted in a pregnancy. I know you abandoned her when she got sick." My voice was shaking now. "And I know that Claire is your daughter." Dad closed his eyes. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it to me. Explain how it's different from what I think." She was different, special. She didn't seem like other 16-year-olds. She was mature, brilliant, intense. And I was young, stupid, and lonely." He opened his eyes. "I'm not making excuses. What I did was wrong. But I didn't know she was sick, not until it was too late." "You were her tutor. You were in a position of trust." "I know." His voice rose, then fell. "I know. You think I haven't lived with that knowledge for 30 years? You think I haven't seen my sin reflected back at me every single day?" In Claire's face. He flinched. "Yes. She's your daughter, your actual biological daughter, and you've treated her like a stranger her entire life." Because I couldn't look at her without remembering. Tears were forming in his eyes now. Without seeing Danielle, without feeling the weight of everything I destroyed. That's not Claire's fault. I know that. Don't you think I know that? He stood up, paced to the window. When CPS called, when they said Claire needed a home, I wanted to say no. I wanted to walk away, the same way I'd walked away from Danielle. But your mother, Mom knew? She found out right before we got married. I confessed everything. The affair, the pregnancy, the way I'd left. I thought she'd leave me. She should have left me. He turned to face me. But she didn't. She said she loved me, said we'd build a life together and put the past behind us. And then Claire needed a home. Your mother was the one who said we had to take her, said it was our responsibility, my responsibility. She was right, but she also never forgave me, never stopped seeing Claire as evidence of my betrayal. His voice cracked. Neither of us could love that little girl the way she deserved. We tried. God, we tried. But every time I looked at Claire, I saw the worst version of myself. And every time your mother looked at her, she saw the woman I'd chosen over her. You didn't choose Danielle. You used her and threw her away. I know. He collapsed back into his chair. I know what I am, Emma. I've always known. And I've spent 30 years trying to be someone better, someone worthy of your mother's forgiveness, someone who deserved the life I built, while Claire suffered, while she spent her whole childhood wondering why her parents didn't love her. Yes, the word was barely a whisper. While Claire suffered, I stood there, looking at this man I thought I knew, my father, my hero, the person I'd modeled my entire life after. A coward, a predator, a man who destroyed one woman and spent 30 years punishing another for his own sins. I'm going to tell Claire, Emma, she deserves to know. She deserves to understand why her life has been what it's been. It will destroy her. Maybe, or maybe it will finally set her free. I opened the study door. You destroyed one woman, Dad. I'm not going to let you destroy another. I flew to Seattle the next day. Claire met me at the airport, surprised but happy. This is so random, she said, hugging me tight. Why didn't you tell me you were coming? I needed to see you, in person. Something in my voice made her pull back, study my face. What's wrong? Can we go somewhere private? There's something I need to tell you. We went to her apartment. Small, cozy, filled with plants and books, and the quiet contentment of someone who'd finally found peace. She'd built this life from nothing, clawed her way to happiness despite everything our family had done to her. Now I was about to burn it all down. Claire, I didn't know where to start. I found some things in the attic at Mom and Dad's house. What kind of things? Documents about you, about where you came from. She went very still. I don't understand. So I told her, all of it. Danielle Hartwell, the tutor relationship, the pregnancy, the mental illness, the custody battle, the adoption, the grandmother who'd spent years trying to reach her. And finally, Dad is your biological father, Claire. You're not adopted in the way you thought. You're his actual daughter. Claire didn't speak, didn't move, just sat there, processing, her face cycling through emotions faster than I could track. That's why they never loved me, she finally said. That's why I always felt like an intruder in my own family. Yes, because Dad couldn't look at me without seeing his crime, and Mom couldn't look at me without seeing his betrayal. Yes, she stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the Seattle skyline, gray and drizzly, a city that matched her mood. I always thought it was something wrong with me, she said quietly, that I was unlovable, defective, that there was some fundamental flaw in my character that made me impossible to love. There's nothing wrong with you. I know that now. She turned to face me, but I didn't know it for 30 years. 30 years of wondering what was so terrible about me that my own parents couldn't stand to look at me. Claire, I'm so sorry. It wasn't your fault. You were a kid. She came back, sat beside me. But I need to tell you something. Something I've never told anyone. My blood went cold. What? I already knew about the adoption. What? I found the documents when I was 16. Same attic. I was looking for Christmas presents. A bitter smile crossed her face. Found something a lot worse. You've known for 16 years? I've known I was adopted for 16 years. I didn't know about Dad being my biological father. She shook her head slowly. God, that explains so much. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because I was 16 and scared and desperate to belong. I thought if I worked hard enough, was good enough, achieved enough, maybe they'd finally love me. Maybe they'd tell me the truth themselves and we could have a real relationship. The tears were flowing now, but they never did. They just kept pretending, kept treating me like a burden they'd been saddled with. Oh, Claire, I spent 20 years waiting for them to choose me, she said, to see me, to explain why I was different, why they couldn't love me the way they loved you. And now I finally know. I was never going to be enough, because I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a punishment. I held her while she cried, held her for an hour, 2 hours, until the tears ran out and all that was left was the exhausted calm of someone who'd finally stopped fighting. What are you going to do? I asked. She wiped her eyes. I need to think, process, figure out what this means for me, for my identity, for everything I thought I knew about myself. And Mom and Dad? I don't know. She looked at me with eyes that had aged a decade in an afternoon. I've spent 3 years building a life without them, building boundaries, finding peace, learning to love myself even though they never did. You don't have to decide anything right now. I know. She took a deep breath. But there's something I need to do first. Something I should have done a long time ago. What? I need to find out about my mother, my biological mother, who she was, what happened to her, why nobody ever told me the truth. She looked at me with something new in her eyes, not anger, not grief, determination. Will you help me? 6 months later. Claire stands in front of a grave she's never seen before. Danielle Marie Hartwell, 1971 to 1998. Beloved daughter, sister, mother. It took us 3 months to find it. Danielle was buried in a small cemetery outside Millbrook, next to her parents. Nobody had visited in years. The grass was overgrown, the headstone weathered and forgotten. We cleaned it together, Claire and I, pulled the weeds, washed the stone, planted fresh flowers. The kind of care that Danielle never got while she was alive. She was beautiful, Claire says, looking at the photograph she'd gotten from Thomas Hartwell. Danielle at 18, before the illness took hold, eyes full of dreams that would never come true. I have her smile. You do. Claire kneels down, touches the cold stone. I don't know what to say to her, she admits. I spent my whole life not knowing she existed, and now she's been dead longer than I ever got to know her. Maybe you don't have to say anything. Maybe just being here is enough. Claire nods slowly. She loved me. Thomas said she loved me more than anything in the world. She did. But she was too sick to take care of me, and then she was dead, and I was stuck with people who saw me as a problem to be solved instead of a person to be loved. I don't have an answer for that. There is no answer. We've spent the last 6 months rebuilding Claire's history, meeting with Thomas, who's become something like a surrogate father, visiting places Danielle used to go, learning about the person Claire might have been if life had gone differently. She hasn't confronted our parents yet. Maybe she never will. The statute of limitations has passed on what Dad did, and there's no legal justice to be found. Just the slow, quiet justice of Claire finally understanding that none of it was her fault. I've decided something, Claire says, standing up. I'm going to become a social worker, specifically for kids in foster care. Really? I was one of them. I know what it's like to feel unwanted, to wonder why you're not good enough, to spend years looking for love in places that were never going to give it. She looks at me. I want to help other kids who feel the same way. I want them to know that their worth isn't determined by the people who were supposed to love them. I hug her, right there in front of Danielle's grave in the dying light of October afternoon. She'd be proud of you, I say. Your mother. She'd be so proud. I hope so. Claire wipes her eyes. I like to think she's somewhere watching, that she finally gets to see who I became. We drive back to Seattle that night, Claire in the passenger seat, watching the miles disappear behind us. I forgive them, she says suddenly. What? Mom and Dad. I forgive them. She turns to look at me. Not for their sake, for mine. Carrying that anger, that resentment, it's too heavy. I don't want to spend the rest of my life waiting for them to love me. What changed? Understanding. Finally understanding that they were broken too, that what Dad did to Danielle broke something in him, and living with it broke something in Mom, and none of us ever had a chance at being a real family because the foundation was poisoned from the start. That's incredibly generous of you. It's not generous, it's practical. She smiles, a real smile, the first one I've seen from her in months. I spent 30 years trying to earn their love. Now I know I never had to earn anything. I was always worthy. The failure was theirs, not mine. She's different now, lighter, like someone who's finally set down a burden they didn't know they were carrying. What happens next? I ask. Life, whatever comes. She looks out the window at the stars emerging in the darkening sky. I have a sister who loves me, an uncle who wants to know me, a career that gives me purpose, a chance to help other people avoid the pain I went through. And our parents? They exist, somewhere, living with the consequences of choices they made 30 years ago. She shrugs. That's their burden now, not mine. I think about that as we drive through the night, about burdens and choices and the things we carry without knowing why. My parents aren't monsters. They're just people. Broken, flawed, human people who made terrible choices and spent decades drowning in the consequences. I haven't forgiven them yet. Maybe I never will. But Claire has, and somehow watching her find peace feels like enough. So that's my story. That's how I discovered why my parents never loved my older sister, and how that discovery changed everything for both of us. But I want to know what you think. After everything you've heard, do you think my parents deserve forgiveness? They didn't set out to hurt Claire. They were just too broken to love her properly. Is that an excuse? Or is there no excuse for the way they treated an innocent child? And here's the harder question. Have you ever discovered something about your family that changed how you saw them? A secret that rewrote your entire history? If you have, I'd love to hear how you handled it, how you rebuilt trust, or didn't, how you found a way forward. Drop a comment, share your story, even if it's just a few words. Because I've learned something in the past 6 months. Secrets only have power when they're kept in the dark. The moment you bring them into the light, they start to lose their grip. Claire is proof of that. And maybe, if you're carrying something similar, you can be too. Sometimes, the families we're born into fail us. But that doesn't mean we're unworthy of love. It just means we have to find it somewhere else. In sisters who show up, in uncles who've been waiting, in communities of strangers who understand what it's like to feel invisible. You are not your family's failures. You never were.